and gentlemen, it was one of the most important days of the month for the Indianapolis 500. It's Carb Day, and despite only having 2 on-track sessions that were both very somewhat short, the 2-hour Carb Day practice session, and I guess not an on-track session, which is the pit stop competition, it was a pretty action-packed day. We've got a pretty good sense of who's going to be fast, who's going to be slow, and who's going to have a lot of work to put in for getting their cars ready for Sunday morning. So without further ado, first up, we're going to take a look at the results from the 2-hour practice session. And again, it's the Ganassi cars, the fastest of anyone. Tony Kanaan at a 227.114 led the field. Second fastest, Marcus Ericsson at a 227.004. Third fastest, the other guy who's been up there all week, Takuma Sato with a 226.839. Fourth fastest, Scott Dixon with a 226.696. And fifth fastest, a bit of a surprise, Brian Reinbold Racing Sage Karam with a 226.517. Now, taking a look at these times, guess who's up there again? It's Chip Ganassi Racing. They are, at this point, the odds-on favorite to win the race. I'd say I would be putting my money on Scott Dixon as the second pick, probably Alex Palou, and I'll talk about this stuff later on because I have a bit of predictions stuff to come up at the end of the video because, last practice session before the 500, I want to get that stuff out of the way. So, other notable things, Sato, again, top 5. I don't think in any of the practice sessions he's been outside of the top 5, and again, second race session in a row that he's in the fast few cars. So, I would say again that if it's not going to be a Ganassi car, it's probably going to be Takuma Sato. He's just shown so much speed. The Ganassi cars have shown so much speed this month. I'd say outside of those 6 cars, I'd be really surprised if someone else won. Obviously it's still possible. It's the Indy 500 and lots of things can go wrong, but the Ganassi cars and Sato have just shown so much pace, and especially guys like Dixon and Sato are so experienced here that I think they have the upper hand in so many different areas. I would really be surprised if it's not a Ganassi car or Takuma Sato winning the 500. I don't know. So next thing I'm going to talk about here, just looking at no-toe times. These aren't exactly indicative of everything. The best thing they could indicate is who's going to be able to lead packs. This is going to be most of the times from people leading packs. So only about half the cars actually set no-toe times, so you're not exactly getting a full gauge of everyone, but the people at the top are going to be people to look out for on race day. Top of the charts with a 221.8 no-toe time, Marcus Ericsson. Second fastest with Felix Rosenquist with a 220.8. Third fastest, another Aero McLaren car, Pato Award with a 220.8. 6.2, which was slightly slower than his teammates. Fourth, Scott Dixon, 220.7, another Ganassi car. And fifth, Alex Palou, another Ganassi car, a 220.2. So, keeps coming up, Ganassi. I think I've explained myself enough at this point. But yeah, I think that's really who you're going to have to watch out for on race day. They're starting out front, too. I mean, that's the thing. They're starting at the front, and they've shown insane pace throughout the month. I would really be hard-pressed to see who else could compete with them. Yeah, but that's about all for results. Let's talk about some of the notable stuff that happened today, because we had 2 pretty big crashes in turn number 1. First up, the smaller of the 2 was David Malukas. Coming into turn number 1, he was going on the inside of Santino Ferrucci. It was a bit of a late move. It looked like Santino had backed out quite a bit, and David Malukas, obviously a rookie, went to the inside and made a pretty big move, and Santino didn't see him coming, or at least didn't notice that he was going to actually be on his inside where he was, and ended up making contact with him in the middle of the corner, which it looked like cut down one of Malukas' tires, and he got a little bit further throughout the corner, and then the rear end of the car just snapped around straight into the fence. I think all 3 of the crashes we've seen so far, other than, 2 out of the 3, the 2 I've talked about so far, which was Kellett's on Monday and Malukas' today, were just cars in turn 1 whose rear ends just snapped around like looked like they had no time to react, honestly. So, obviously, Malukas was due to a cut tire, but, you know, it's interesting to see that happening. I mean, the only crashes have been in turn 1. So, a bit of a scary crash for Malukas. Obviously, when people are crashing at that speed, especially going into turn walls, which, you know, depending on how you end up spinning around, you can hit them at weird angles, and that can end up hurting people. So it's always scary to watch those crashes. Second crash of the day. Both of these were later on in the session. Colton Herta was with about 20 minutes to go. The second crash was Colton Herta into turn number 1, just really loose coming into the corner. His rear end started to snap around. Looked like he saved it for a second, but it got him way out of the groove pretty late in the corner. There was going to be no chance for him to save it. Rear end got loose again, and he went rear end first into the turn 1 wall. The front end of the car, that ended up pitching the front end of the car up. It caught air, and the car did a backflip, essentially, and ended up flipping over, and he landed on on the top of the car and slid all the way down to the inside of turn number 2, and he ended up hitting another wall later on, which is obviously scary for a driver. You know, you don't know what's going on in there. All you're just seeing is sky ground, and then just scraping along the ground. You have no idea what's going on. So obviously to hit another wall afterwards, I'm sure was scary for Colton. It was a really dangerous looking accident, but Colton, before the car even came to a rest, Colton was able to be on the radio to the team saying, I'm okay. Safety team had to go over to the car and flip it over before Colton was able to get out. That's kind of a thing with the aero screen cars. It's a bit harder to, since there's no space there, cars essentially resting on the roll hoop and the aero screen. There's not very much space for a driver to get out, unlike, you know, what you would have had with a no aero screen car. So obviously that safety measure makes it a little bit harder to get out in the event of a car being flipped over. So they had to flip the car over, and Colton was able to get out. Colton was okay, again, surprisingly enough, which, you know, again, I look at these crashes and I always think the worst. Not that anyone's going to die or anything, but that people could be seriously hurt, and it's always amazing just how safe these cars are. And again, that's happened with Colton Herta. He'll be going to a backup car, and from what I saw, I haven't seen any official, team statement or anything, but I assume Malukas will also be going to a backup car. So they'll both be starting at the back for the 500, and they'll have a long way to go, especially considering Colton was mid-pack in the session, and so was Dave Malukas. Malukas was 17th. Obviously, both of them didn't get any late running, so, you know, that's not entirely a judge of how they are doing, but it's probably pretty close. Malukas was 17th, and Colton was 20th, so it'll definitely be a big fight back for them if they want to put up a challenge for the 500. So that's about all I have for the practice session. Let's go ahead and move on to the pit stop competition. Now, I'm sure some of you guys were screaming at your screen wanting me to mention that, which I forgot to mention, that both sessions actually were delayed due to rain. The practice session was delayed until about 1 o'clock due to some pretty torrential rain. It ended up going until, I believe they said 2:30. So about a half an hour taken off of that session due to that. They essentially said the session's over at 2:30, which was how it went with rescheduling. And then at 3:30, they went out and did the pit stop competition. So lost about 30 minutes for the final practice session. And then the pit stop competition, which was scheduled to start at 3:30, actually ended up starting a little late, more like 3:45 or 4, because right as they were about to start the first round with Alex Palou and I forget. Alex Palou and I believe Pato Award. No, that's not right. Anyways, I don't know who it was, but it ended up starting to rain, and they, literally the cars were fired, and they had to, turn the engines off and delay the session, and it ended up delaying it for about 30 minutes, made the pit lane a little bit damp, but they were able to dry it off mostly. You know, it's going to get drier as more cars run over it, and obviously they had blowers out there or whatever drying it. So by the end, it was able to be pretty much completely dry. It was a bit interesting, you know, how how much rain is too much rain for a pit stop competition? You know, you could always say just bolt on the rain tires, but I don't think it was wet enough for rain tires, but it was probably dry enough for the dry tires to work, but, you know, these are oval cars, and while they're not 500 cars, they are going to be running them at Detroit, so I'm sure the teams didn't want to take any unnecessary risks crashing a car for a pit stop competition, which almost didn't happen, which is the only other thing I have to talk about throughout the pit stop competition that was really newsworthy was Sage Karam in a round against Pato O'Ward. Ended up out of his box. It looked like the left rear tire didn't get on, and he spun around exiting his pit box. He launched his left front tire into the team wall behind it, and it was Connor Daly's pit crew member was able to catch it, but it's a bit scary when a tire gets launched, because those things are extremely heavy, and if you're not looking at it, it can, you know, those can hurt people big time. So it was, I don't know, it's a bit scary to see a tire get launched, but Karam ended up narrowly missing Pato, so he almost had an incident in the pit stop competition, but that was about it. Throughout the pit stop competition, looked like Joseph Newgarden was extremely fast, and Scott Dixon, it seems like as he always is with these competitions, he's generally pretty good in them, was able to work his way through the rounds, and the final round was Joseph Newgarden versus Scott Dixon. So the first round, Newgarden won just by a little bit. He was able to get out of his pit box first and get to the line. He was setting crazy fast times. He was pretty consistently setting times in the 11-second range. And then on the last round, it was extremely close coming into the pit box. They were essentially neck and neck. Coming out of the pit box, they were also neck and neck, and then Dixon stalled. So that meant that Joseph Newgarden won both of the first two rounds and was able to win the pit stop competition. So great for the Team Penske guys. They said that was the 50th year anniversary of the pit stop competition, which I believe Team Penske won in their first year. So obviously a bit of a cool landmark for them to win the 50th pit stop competition, not the 50th pit stop, 50th anniversary of the pit stop competition. They haven't done it every year. But that was cool for them. They said they've won 18 pit stop competitions, which is just absolutely insane for one team to have won that many competitions. You know, they've won 18 500s and now 18 pit stop competitions. It's insane how good Roger Penske is at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I guess he owns the place, figuratively and literally. But yeah, that was the pit stop competition. Newgarden was able to pull off the win, which I believe is his first ever. So yeah, it was pretty exciting to watch. A little bit delayed, but it was cool to see Newgarden put in a 10.9 time on his final run, which is also crazy. This is the fastest time I believe we've ever seen in that. So cool for Newgarden. Lastly, I'm going to give out my picks for who's going to do well and who might struggle for the Indianapolis 500. So lastly, it's prediction time for the 106th Indianapolis 500. I'm going to be predicting 3 drivers I think are going to excel, 3 drivers I think are going to struggle, a team that I think is going to excel, a team that I think is going to struggle, and the Indianapolis 500 champion, or at least who I think is going to be the Indianapolis 500 champion. Now, out of the drivers and teams that I think are going to do well and not do so well, these aren't my picks for, you know, highest finishing 2 through 3, 4 drivers and, you know, lowest finishing drivers. These are just drivers who I think are going to do better than a lot of people think they are, and drivers who I think are going to do a lot worse than people might think they are. So first up, I'm going to do team that I think is going to have a bit of, you know, a bit of a struggle race for the 500, which I think is going to be Andretti Autosports, because they've been not really very close at all throughout most of these sessions. Looking at their runs today, you had Marco Andretti 9th, which it seems like Marco's always able to put up a fast time in practice. It's really questionable how legitimate those lap times are and how much that's Marco just going out and setting a big toe lap. He's said he's not doing that anymore, but it's questionable, especially looking at the rest of his team's results. Colton Herta was 20th, the next fastest Andretti car, and Alexander Rossi, 25th, Romain Grosjean, 27th, and Devlin DeFrancesco, 30th. Andretti also wasn't fast in the Monday session. They're starting pretty low down on the grid, mostly. Romain Grosjean starting 9th. But I think Andretti's not going to be doing so well throughout this race. They've really not shown up much. Looking at their affiliated teams, Elio was 18th, Pagenaud was 21st. All the Andretti prepared cars really haven't seemed to do so well this month, and especially these last 2 practices. So I really am kind of concerned for how those guys are going to do. So for a team that I think is going to do better than a lot of people are thinking, Arrow McLaren. Juan Pablo Montoya is never really fast in practice sessions. It seems like he really shows his pace in the race. Obviously, being a veteran, he's really able to, turn it up another notch when it comes to the race. The 2 other Arrow McLaren guys, Pato and Felix, are both starting pretty decently high up in the race, 7th and 8th. And they've shown quite a lot of speed throughout the month, and especially in these last 2 practice sessions. It seems to me like Arrow McLaren might be a team to watch for, guys in the top 5, guys in the top 3, and who knows, maybe they'll win. They were fast in no-toe time, so I think they'd still be able to lead. But that's who I think is going to be your team to watch. Next up, drivers that I think are going to struggle a little bit. First up is Elio Castroneves. Being last year's former champion, I think a lot of people are going to come in expecting big things from Elio, obviously the drive for 5, and I am personally a big Elio fan, and I really want Elio to do well this year, but I don't know how much that's going to happen. Obviously, I talked about Andretti's speed issues. Elio's starting really far back in the pack, especially compared to where we normally see him. It's not been a good month for Elio, and I think a lot of people are going to come in expecting, the former champion's going to go out and compete to win the race again. I would be surprised to see Elio in the top 3. I'd not be surprised to see him, top 10, 15 range, but I don't think he's going to be as high as a lot of people are thinking he will be. I might get, a lot of hate for that opinion, but I think just looking at the results, that's what I've seen. Next up is Graham Rahal, and I think this is more of a Rahal team as a whole, but I think Graham Rahal is the leader of that, and Graham has, in the past, shown a lot of pace at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I don't think this is going to be Graham's year. He was 28th in this practice session. He is starting very far down in the order. He's the fastest Rahal car by quite a bit, but he was still very slow compared to a lot of other people in the field. He just hasn't done well in the practice sessions, and he's not got a good starting spot. So I wouldn't expect to see much of a threat from Rahal, at least when it comes to, winning the race or anything. Graham seems to be able to make up a lot of positions in races. He seems to always not qualify very well and then really show a lot of pace in the race, just in general across the IndyCar season. I don't know if that's going to be the case this year. Of course, track position has ended up being key with this aero kit at Indianapolis. It's very hard to pass past, 3rd or 4th place. So if we end up with a pack race, not a pack race, but a race with a somewhat close together pack, not a lot of yellows, not a lot of opportunity for pit strategy, I wouldn't be surprised if Graham Rahal struggles a bit. Last driver I think is possibly going to struggle a little bit is... And I guess I've tried to put some variety into this list, with different teams that are getting mentioned. But I think Colton Herta is going to probably lack some pace this month. Again, I talked about how both him and his team have been quite slow throughout the month. Obviously, Colton suffered quite a big crash on Friday. I think when those things happen on Carb Day, it's pretty hard to recover from them. I mean, you're switching out chassis. For the Indianapolis 500, they're essentially taking a road course car and turning it into an oval car with no practice whatsoever. They're just going to throw that out onto the grid. He's going to be starting in the back, and I don't think he's going to make up much spots, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a bit of a struggle year for Colton. I think just the circumstances around it, not even necessarily the fact that Colton's been very slow this month, but just the circumstances around crashing on Carb Day and not being, like, the fastest guy out there, I think I would be extremely surprised if Colton has a very notable 500 this year. Moving on to 3 drivers I think are going to excel past a lot of people's expectations this year. First up is Jimmy Johnson. I think Jimmy's become a bit of a meme within IndyCar, for last year he'd done only road courses, and he really struggled doing that. I don't think Jimmy's exactly a very good road course driver, especially when it comes to IndyCar. He's very out of his element. He's a NASCAR driver, and in those races he showed very little pace and wasn't very competitive. But when we came to Texas this year, that was really where I thought we were going to get a judge of whether Jimmy is slow in IndyCar or slow at road courses. And Jimmy showed that it's road courses that are the issue, because at Texas, he had an extremely good performance, ended up coming through the field a couple of times and qualified decent and was able to compete in the top 5 at some points. It was crazy to see Jimmy up there competing. He's been very fast this month. He was in the Fast 12, and he's been in the top 5 in a lot of sessions. I think a lot of people look at Jimmy somewhat as a NASCAR driver who's out of his element, but I think this year Jimmy could challenge for top 3s, and if he gets the right strategy or dice land the right way, I think Jimmy could even, as crazy as it sounds, compete for a win, which I think is crazy to say about Jimmy Johnson in his first year on ovals in IndyCar. But he's no stranger to ovals, he's no stranger to 500-mile races, and he's no stranger to being at the front. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Jimmy being very competitive in this year's 500. Next up, I think we're going to see an unprecedented amount of speed out of the Dreyer and Reinbold racing cars. They've been unusually fast this month, and especially Sage Karam. I think he's 5th in this session. Obviously, making the top 5 is great for Karam, great for Dreyer and Reinbold. He was 9th in Monday's session, so seems like Karam really knows what he's doing this month. He's been with Dreyer and Reinbold since like 2015, so I really think that a lot of people don't really think about the Dreyer and Reinbold cars a lot, but Karam is very fast this year. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him in the top 5, just because of the pure pace they've shown this month. It's a bit cool to see the one-off teams doing well. Obviously, last year Elio wasn't a one-off, but only did the Indy 500. Was his first race of the season. I didn't exactly word that well, but Karam has shown a lot of pace this year, and despite being a one-race-a-year team for the Indy 500, they've got 2 cars in their stable, and I think Karam especially has shown a lot of pace this month. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Sage Karam competitive way more than normal this year in the 500. And last up of picks that I think are going to do well, Rena's VK. Now this one I'm kind of going out on a limb a bit, because VK hasn't exactly done great in the practice sessions, and neither has his teammate Ed Carpenter of the 2 race practice sessions. They have done very well, though, in the no-toe times of those sessions. They really only ran a few laps in each session, at least compared to most other teams. And in the laps they ran, while they didn't run good outright times, it seemed like they were able to run well in the pack, and it seemed like their no-toe times were pretty good. Now, the reason I'm picking VK, because of the no-toe times, is he's starting 3rd, so he's bound to get to the front at some point, I believe. Last year he started 3rd and was able to get to the front within 40 laps or so, and was able to lead the race quite well. I think that VK is going to be in a similar position this year, and while they don't have outright pace necessarily on the timing charts, I think they have a lot of good pace at the front of the pack, and especially leading. I think their no-toe times are really extremely good. They were up in the top few both sessions. They weren't in top 5 in the last session, but they were pretty close. They were something like 7th and 8th. So I think, going on a little bit of a limb here, because I couldn't exactly find anyone else to go with for this, I think VK would probably be my pick for another driver to maybe go out and impress a little bit more than people expect. Lastly, my pick to win, which, I mean, if you've gotten to this point in the video, you know who my pick to win is. It's Scott Dixon. There's no question it's Scott Dixon. I mean, he's on pole with a stupidly fast time. He's been very fast in the practice sessions. And I trust Dixon's race pace. I've always trusted Dixon's race pace in the 500. I think he's able to really, go into another gear practically, and just, he's extremely fast always at Indy. He's only won one race in 2008. He's had a lot of bad luck since then. I think this is going to be the year. Last year, he got caught out by stalling on pit road, which wasn't his fault. The car had ran out of fuel. It was at the beginning of the race, too, and he went a lap down. So I think without that, Dixon would have been competitive last year, and I think he's going to be competitive again this year. He's my pick to win outright. If it's not Dixon, it's Palou. But Dixon has a ton of pace, a ton of experience, and I think this is going to be the year that Dixon gets his second Indy 500 win from the pole. So that is about all for my predictions, my race, or my pre-race wrap-up, practice session wrap-up, all the stuff I did in this video. That's all, folks. So thank you guys all so much for watching. I'll have a starting grid video out probably late tomorrow. I haven't done a ton of work on that. I've been feeling sick recently, so, But I'll have that out tomorrow, hopefully, and then tons of race content after the race on Sunday. So thank you guys all so much for watching. I will see you all later. Bye.